July 13, 2023. Midtown Manhattan. Rush hour traffic grinds to a halt as unmarked vehicles box in a Chevrolet Avalanche. The driver, a 59-year-old architect named Rex Heuermann, steps out in a suit and tie, briefcase in hand. Within seconds, he's in handcuffs. Within hours, investigators are inside his Long Island home, pulling up floorboards, tearing through walls, imaging every hard drive they can find. And on one of those drives, a document, a blueprint, not for a building, for murder. 5 cases, 5 American communities torn apart. 5 investigations that have dominated headlines, true crime forums, and dinner table conversations from coast to coast. And the question everyone's asking, how did we miss the signs? Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, let's see how far these stories have traveled. Tonight, we're going deep. The Gilgo Beach serial killer who hid behind a family and a career. The Idaho student murders that ended in a guilty plea after a genetic genealogy breakthrough. The 27-year-old cold case that finally named a suspect in Tupac Shakur's death. The Delphi murders conviction that came with leaked photos, conspiracy theories, and a community's demand for answers. And the Boston cop found dead in the snow, with his girlfriend now suing the very people who investigated her. These aren't just cases. They're mirrors, reflecting who we are, what we fear, and how we define justice in 2025. If you're new here, welcome to Crime Cortex, where we don't just tell the story, we dissect it. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, because we're diving deep today. Let's go. Case 1. Let's start on Long Island. Ocean Parkway. December 2010. A police officer and his cadaver dog are searching for a missing woman, Shanann Gilbert, a 24-year-old sex worker last seen in the gated community of Oak Beach. They don't find Shanann that day. But they find something else. 4 bodies, wrapped in burlap, dumped along a desolate stretch of beach highway. The discovery sends shockwaves through Suffolk County. This isn't a single murder. This is a pattern, a predator. And within months, the search expands. Investigators comb the area, and by spring 2011, they've found 6 more sets of remains. 10 victims in total, most of them women, most of them sex workers, most of them advertising online through platforms like Craigslist and Backpage. The victims have names: Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Maureen Brainerd Barnes. These 4, found first, wrapped in burlap, become known as the Gilgo 4. Then there's Jessica Taylor, whose torso was found in 2003 in Manorville, with additional remains discovered near Gilgo in 2011. Valerie Mack, also dismembered, her remains scattered across 2 locations years apart. Sandra Costilla, found in 1993 in North Sea, her case reopened decades later. The case becomes known as the Gilgo Beach murders, and it goes cold. For over a decade, theories multiply. Is it one killer or several? Is it someone in law enforcement? Someone with intimate knowledge of the area? The investigation stalls. Leadership changes. The Suffolk County Police Department faces criticism for mishandling evidence, for turf wars with the FBI, for letting the case grow cold while families wait for answers. But behind the scenes, a task force is formed. And in 2022, they get serious. They bring in new technology. Advanced DNA techniques. Mitochondrial DNA analysis. Hair strand comparison. They start cross-referencing old evidence with new databases. And they zero in on one man. Rex Heuermann. He's not what you'd expect. He's a registered architect with his own firm, RH Consultants and Associates, operating out of a Fifth Avenue office in Manhattan. He works on projects across the city. He has a wife, Asa Ellerup, and 2 children. He owns a house in Massapequa Park, a modest, cluttered home on a quiet street. He's 6'4", over 240 pounds, and according to neighbors, he's quiet. Keeps to himself. Doesn't make waves. Nothing flashy. Nothing suspicious. But the evidence tells a different story. Investigators tail him for months. They watch his routines. They track his movements. And in January 2023, they get their first solid piece of evidence: DNA. Heuermann throws away a pizza crust outside his Manhattan office. Investigators retrieve it from the trash. The DNA on that crust matches DNA found on the burlap used to wrap the victims. But they don't stop there. They analyze hair strands found on 3 of the victims, hair that, through mitochondrial DNA testing, matches Heuermann's wife and daughter. The implication is devastating. The killer used materials from his own home. His family's DNA is literally woven into the evidence. Then they search his devices. And that's where they find the planning document. It's not a confession. It's worse. It's a manual. Detailed notes on how to select victims, how to avoid detection, how to dispose of bodies. Investigators describe it as methodical, calculated, the work of someone who treated murder like a project. Like architecture. There are searches on his computer. Hundreds of them. Searches for the victims' names. Searches for terms like, why could law enforcement not trace the calls made by Melissa Barthelemy? Searches for updates on the investigation. He was watching, monitoring, staying one step ahead. Heuermann is arrested on July 13, 2023, and charged with 3 murders: Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. The arrest is a media earthquake. Long Island residents are stunned. His family is blindsided. His wife files for divorce within weeks. In June 2024, prosecutors add 4 more charges: Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, and Sandra Costilla. That's 7 victims. 7 families who've waited over a decade, some over 30 years, for answers. In September 2025, a judge rules that all 7 murder charges will be tried together in a single trial. The decision is significant. It means the jury will hear the full scope of the alleged crimes, the pattern, the methodology. It also means the trial will be massive, potentially months long, with hundreds of pieces of evidence and dozens of witnesses. Heuermann has pleaded not guilty to all counts. His defense team, led by attorney Michael Brown, is challenging the DNA evidence, questioning the chain of custody, and arguing that the case is built on circumstantial science rather than hard proof. They're also raising questions about the searches. Were they legal? Were warrants properly obtained? Was evidence planted or contaminated? But here's what makes this case so deeply unsettling. Rex Heuermann wasn't on the run. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was living in plain sight. Going to work every day. Coming home to his family. Mowing his lawn. Paying his taxes. Blending in. And that's the nightmare, isn't it? The idea that the person sitting next to you on the subway, the guy in line at the coffee shop, the neighbor who waves hello, could be capable of something unthinkable. The families of the victims have waited so long. Melissa Barthelemy's mother, Lynn, has been fighting for justice since 2010. Maureen Brainerd Barnes' sister has never stopped searching for answers. These women were daughters, sisters, mothers. They were human beings with lives, with dreams, with people who loved them. And for years, their deaths were treated as less important because of how they made a living. The trial is still pending. The families are still waiting. And investigators are still combing through cold cases across the tri-state area, looking for connections. Because if Heuermann is guilty, the question isn't just how he did it. It's how many more are out there. Case 2. November 13, 2022. Moscow, Idaho. A college town tucked into the rolling hills of the Palouse. Population, 25,000. The kind of place where people don't lock their doors. Where students walk home alone at night without a second thought. Where the biggest news is usually a Vandals football game. Until that night. 1122 King Road. A white, 3-story rental house near the University of Idaho campus. 6 students live there. It's a Sunday night, the tail end of a weekend. Some of them have been out. Some have been home. By 2 a.m., the house is quiet. And then, sometime between 3 and 4 a.m., someone enters. 4 of them, Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Madison Mogan, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, and Ethan Chapin, 20, are stabbed to death in their beds. 2 surviving roommates, asleep on the lower floor, are unharmed. They don't hear anything unusual. They don't call 911 until nearly noon the next day, when friends come over and find the bodies. No forced entry. No sign of a struggle outside the bedrooms. The killer moves through the house like a ghost. Targeted. Efficient. Brutal. The community is paralyzed. Parents pull their kids out of school. Vigils are held on campus. The Moscow Police Department holds press conferences, but for weeks, they have no suspect. No weapon. No clear motive. They say the public is not in danger, but no one believes them. How can you say that when a killer is still out there? Tips flood in. Thousands of them. Investigators chase down leads. They look at ex-boyfriends, classmates, delivery drivers, anyone who might have had contact with the victims. They release a description of a vehicle of interest, a white Hyundai Elantra, 2011-2013 model, seen near the house around the time of the murders. And then, 47 days later, they make an arrest. Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old Ph.D. student in criminology at Washington State University, just 8 miles across the state line in Pullman. He's pulled over in Pennsylvania, where he'd driven home for the holidays with his father. Pennsylvania State Police, working with the FBI, execute a high-risk traffic stop on December 30, 2022. Kohberger is taken into custody without incident. The evidence against him is circumstantial but damning. First, the car. Kohberger owns a white Hyundai Elantra. Surveillance footage places a vehicle matching that description near the King Road house multiple times in the weeks leading up to the murders, and again the night of. His phone pings off cell towers in the area at least 12 times before November 13. He's been there, repeatedly. Second, the DNA. Investigators find a knife sheath at the scene, left on one of the beds next to Madison Mogan's body. On the snap button of that sheath, touch DNA. And through investigative genetic genealogy, the same technique used to catch the Golden State Killer, they trace it to Kohberger's family tree. They build a family tree using public DNA databases, narrow it down, and confirm it with DNA collected from trash at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. Third, the digital evidence. Kohberger's phone goes dark, turned off or in airplane mode, during the window of the murders. But before and after, it pings towers near the crime scene. He drives past the house again hours after the killings, as if returning to the scene. Fourth, the search history. Investigators find searches on Kohberger's devices related to the case, the victims, and the investigation. He's following the news. He's watching. He's charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. The case is moved to Ada County due to pretrial publicity. Jury selection is set to take place in a different county to ensure impartiality. The death penalty is on the table. The defense, led by public defender Ann Taylor, fights hard. They challenge the use of genetic genealogy, arguing it's an invasion of privacy and a violation of the Fourth Amendment. They question the reliability of touch DNA. Can you really convict someone based on skin cells left on a button? They fight to suppress evidence from cell phone pings and surveillance footage, arguing warrants were improperly obtained. For months, the case is headed toward what everyone expects will be a blockbuster trial. Cameras in the courtroom, national media camped outside, families of the victims preparing to testify. The death penalty on the table. Legal analysts predicting it could be the trial of the decade. But then, July 2, 2025, everything changes. Bryan Kohberger enters a guilty plea. All 4 counts of first-degree murder. In exchange, prosecutors take the death penalty off the table. On July 23, 2025, he's sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He waives his right to appeal. No trial. No testimony from the surviving roommates. No cross-examination of the DNA evidence. No explanation of motive. Just a plea, a sentence, and silence. For some, it's relief. The families of Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan don't have to endure a years-long trial. They don't have to sit in a courtroom and hear every horrific detail. They don't have to relive the worst night of their lives over and over. The community doesn't have to be dragged through the media circus. For others, it's frustration. There are still unanswered questions. Why did he do it? Did he know the victims? Was this a random act, or was someone targeted? What was the motive? And were the genetic genealogy methods, and the touch DNA, really as solid as prosecutors claimed, or did Kohberger plead out because his defense knew a jury might convict anyway? We'll never know, because the plea deal closed the book. But here's what we do know: 4 young people, full of potential, full of life, were taken in the middle of the night. Kaylee was about to graduate and move to Texas. Madison was her best friend, inseparable. Xana and Ethan were in love, building a future together. They were 20 and 21 years old. They had families who adored them. Friends who miss them. Futures that were stolen. And the man responsible will spend the rest of his life in a cell, with no chance of freedom. Justice? Maybe. Closure? That's harder to say, because closure implies an ending. And for the families, for the friends, for the community of Moscow, Idaho, this will never truly end. Case 3. September 7, 1996. Las Vegas. The MGM Grand. Mike Tyson just knocked out Bruce Seldon in the first round. The crowd is electric. Tupac Shakur is there with Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight and a crew of friends and bodyguards. They're celebrating. The night is young. But in the lobby, something happens. A fight breaks out between Tupac's entourage and a man named Orlando Anderson, a known member of the South Side Compton Crips. The altercation is caught on casino surveillance. Tupac and his crew jump Anderson, punching and kicking him before security breaks it up. Anderson leaves. No arrests are made. Tupac and Suge Knight leave the casino around 8:30 p.m. They're headed to Club 662, a nightclub Knight co-owns. Tupac is in the passenger seat of Knight's black BMW 750. They're rolling through the Las Vegas Strip, music loud, windows down. Tupac is on top of the world. His album, All Eyes on Me, is a massive success. He's a superstar. They stop at a red light on Flamingo Road, near the intersection with Koval Lane. It's 11:15 p.m. A white Cadillac pulls up alongside them on the passenger side. The back window rolls down. And then, shots ring out. 14 rounds are fired. 4 of them hit Tupac, 2 in the chest, 1 in the arm, 1 in the thigh. Suge Knight is grazed by a bullet fragment. The Cadillac speeds off. Knight, despite being injured, drives Tupac toward the hospital, but they're pulled over by police and an ambulance is called. Tupac is rushed to University Medical Center. He undergoes multiple surgeries. For 6 days, he fights. And on September 13, 1996, he dies. He's 25 years old. The murder rocks the world. Tupac wasn't just a rapper, he was a voice. A poet. A revolutionary. A symbol of a generation. His death becomes one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American history, intertwined with the murder of the notorious B.I.G. 6 months later in Los Angeles. Theories multiply. East Coast versus West Coast. Gang retaliation. Record label conspiracies. But no one is ever charged. For 27 years, the case goes cold. Witnesses refuse to talk. The code of the streets, no snitching, holds firm. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department investigates, but leads dry up. Orlando Anderson, the man Tupac's crew jumped hours before the shooting, is questioned but never charged. He's killed in a gang-related shootout in 1998. The case seems destined to remain unsolved forever. Until 2018. That's when Duane, Keffe D. Davis, a former Compton Crips leader and Orlando Anderson's uncle, publishes a memoir called Compton Street Legend. In it, he admits he was in the white Cadillac that night. He names the shooter, his nephew, Orlando Anderson. Anderson, the same man Tupac's crew jumped in the MGM lobby hours earlier. Keffe D describes the shooting in detail. He says it was retaliation. Payback for the beating. But Keffe D doesn't just write about it. He talks about it. Interviews. Documentaries. Bet. VH1. He tells the story over and over, in vivid detail. He describes how they got the gun, how they drove around looking for Tupac, how they spotted the BMW at the red light. He even describes the moment the shots were fired. And he believes he's protected, because back in 2008, he says, he was granted immunity by a federal task force investigating Tupac's murder and the notorious B.I.G.'s murder in exchange for his cooperation. He gave them information. He told them what he knew. And in return, he thought he was untouchable. But here's the problem, that immunity was tied to a specific federal investigation. And it didn't cover state charges. September 29, 2023. Keffe D is arrested at his home in Henderson, Nevada, and charged with murder. Not as the shooter, but as the orchestrator. Under Nevada law, anyone who aids or abets a murder can be charged as if they pulled the trigger. Prosecutors argue that Keffe D provided the gun, coordinated the retaliation, and was in the car when the shots were fired. That makes him just as guilty as the person who pulled the trigger. The evidence: his own words, his memoir, his interviews, hours of footage where he describes, in his own voice, what happened that night. His defense: he was lying. He made it all up for clout, for book sales, for relevance. He wanted to be seen as a player, as someone important in the hip-hop world. And even if he didn't make it up, he says, he had immunity. He cooperated with the feds. He was promised protection. The judge disagrees. Pretrial rulings allow his memoir and interviews to be used as evidence. His immunity claims are denied. The court finds that the immunity agreement was limited in scope and doesn't apply to this state prosecution. But here's where it gets messy: there's no gun. The murder weapon was never recovered. There's no ballistics. No forensic evidence tying Keffe D to the scene. No fingerprints. No DNA. The white Cadillac was never found. The case is built entirely on his confessions he now says were fabricated. His defense team raises another issue: the 27-year delay. Evidence from 1996 has been lost or compromised. Witnesses have died. Memories have faded. How can Keffe D get a fair trial when the crime happened nearly 3 decades ago? The trial, originally set for March 2025, has been postponed to February 9, 2026. Keffe D remains in custody at the Clark County Detention Center. His legal team has filed an appeal with the Nevada Supreme Court, arguing that the 27-year delay violates his right to a fair trial and that the prosecution is relying on statements that were coerced or fabricated. If you're finding value in this, hit that like button, it helps more than you know. So here's the question: can you charge someone for a murder based solely on what they said in a book? And if you can, should you, especially 27 years after the fact? Tupac's family wants justice. His sister, Tupac Shakur, has said the arrest brings some measure of peace. The hip-hop community wants answers. Fans around the world want closure. But justice delayed this long starts to feel less like resolution and more like spectacle. Is this about holding someone accountable, or is it about finally closing a case that's haunted Las Vegas Metro for decades? The trial is still months away. And until then, the question remains: will Keffe D be convicted for the murder of Tupac Shakur, or will this case collapse under the weight of its own age? Case 4. February 13, 2017. Delphi, Indiana. A small town of about 3,000 people, nestled along the Wabash River. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Where kids ride bikes to school. Where the biggest attraction is the Monon High Bridge Trail, a historic railroad bridge converted into a hiking path. It's a Monday. Schools are closed for a teacher in service day. 2 8th-grade girls, Abby Williams, 13, and Libby German, 14, decide to go for a hike. They're best friends. Inseparable. Libby's older sister drops them off at the trailhead around 1 p.m. The weather's decent for February. They're planning to be picked up a few hours later. But when the pickup time comes, they're not there. Calls go unanswered. Texts go unread. By evening, their families are frantic. Search parties are organized. Volunteers comb the trails with flashlights. The next day, February 14th, their bodies are found less than a mile from the bridge, in a wooded area near Deer Creek. They've been murdered. The details are horrific, and authorities keep most of them sealed. But what they do release is extraordinary evidence. In the final moments of her life, Libby German recorded her killer on her phone. A grainy video of a man walking toward them on the bridge. He's wearing jeans, a blue jacket, and a hat. And audio, a voice, low and commanding, down the hill. The video and audio are released to the public. The case explodes. It's not just local news, it's national. International. The image of the man on the bridge, known as Bridge Guy, is everywhere. Tips flood in by the thousands. Sketches are drawn, first one, then a second, different sketch released 2 years later. Theories multiply. Online sleuths dissect every frame of the video, every syllable of the audio. But for 5 years, there's no arrest. The investigation is massive. The FBI gets involved. Billboards go up. Reward money climbs into the hundreds of thousands. Investigators chase down thousands of tips. They look at registered sex offenders, transients, locals, anyone who might have been in the area that day. And then, October 26, 2022, police arrest Richard Allen, a 50-year-old pharmacy technician who lives in Delphi. He's been there the whole time. Working at the local CVS. Living on a quiet street. Raising a family. Blending in. The arrest shocks the community. People knew him. They'd gotten prescriptions filled by him. He was just there. Unremarkable. The evidence against him is a mix of circumstantial and confessional. First, he admits to being on the trail that day. In 2017, shortly after the murders, Allen voluntarily spoke to a conservation officer and said he was on the Monon High Bridge Trail between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m., the exact window when Abby and Libby were there. But somehow, that tip was misfiled, and Allen wasn't interviewed again until 2022, when a volunteer reviewing old tips flagged it. Second, his clothing. In his 2017 statement, Allen described what he was wearing: a blue or black Carhartt jacket, jeans, and a beanie or skull cap. It matches the description of the man in Libby's video. Third, the ballistics. A bullet found at the crime scene, unfired, but cycled through a gun's chamber, is forensically linked to a Sig Sauer .40 caliber handgun that Allen owns. The prosecution's expert testifies that the markings on the bullet are consistent with Allen's gun. The defense brings in their own expert who disputes this, saying you can't reliably match an unfired bullet to a specific weapon. And then there are the confessions. While in custody, Allen confesses more than 60 times, to his wife, to his mother, to a psychologist, to corrections officers, to other inmates. He describes details that, prosecutors argue, only the killer would know. He says he cut the girls' throats. He says he covered their bodies with sticks. He says he intended to sexually assault them but was spooked by a van driving nearby. But his defense says those confessions are the product of a mental breakdown. Allen was held in solitary confinement at Westville Correctional Facility for months, in conditions his lawyers describe as inhumane. He was on suicide watch. He was eating his own feces. He was deteriorating psychologically. And his confessions, they argue, are unreliable, the ramblings of a man in crisis, not the admissions of a guilty conscience. The trial is a media circus. There's a scandal when crime scene photos are leaked by Allen's original defense team, leading to their disqualification and replacement. There's a controversial, Odinism, theory, suggesting the murders were ritualistic killings by a pagan group with ties to local men, that the defense wants to introduce. They argue that sticks arranged on the victims' bodies resemble Norse runes. But Special Judge Fran Gull refuses to allow it at trial, ruling there's insufficient evidence to support the theory. Jury selection takes place in Allen County, over 100 miles away, due to pretrial publicity. The trial itself is held in Carroll County, where Delphi is located. No cameras are allowed in the courtroom, only sketch artists. What's the weather like where you are right now? Sunny. Raining. Let me know. The trial lasts weeks. The prosecution presents the ballistics evidence, the confessions, the timeline. They call witnesses who saw a man matching Allen's description on the trail that day. They play Libby's video and audio. They argue that Allen is Bridge Guy, and Bridge Guy is the killer. The defense attacks the ballistics, calling it junk science. They argue the confessions are false, coerced by psychological torture. They point to the lack of DNA evidence linking Allen to the scene. They suggest the investigation was rushed, that other suspects were ignored, that the Odinism theory was dismissed too quickly. November 11, 2024. After weeks of testimony and days of deliberation, the jury delivers a verdict: guilty on all 4 counts of murder, 2 counts of murder while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping, and 2 counts of murder. December 20, 2024. Richard Allen is sentenced to 130 years in prison, the maximum allowed under Indiana law. 65 years for each victim, to be served consecutively. For the families of Abby and Libby, the verdict is justice. Abby's mother, Anna Williams, and Libby's grandmother, Becky Patty, have been fighting for this moment for nearly 8 years. They've attended every hearing, every press conference. They've kept the case alive in the public eye. And now, finally, there's a conviction. For the Delphi community, it's closure, or at least the beginning of it. The man who terrorized their town, who made parents afraid to let their kids walk alone, is behind bars. But for others watching from the outside, the case raises uncomfortable questions. How much of Allen's conviction rests on solid evidence, and how much on confessions made by a man in psychological crisis? Were alternative theories dismissed too quickly? And in a case this high profile, with this much public pressure, can any defendant truly get a fair trial? The appeal is ongoing. Allen's legal team has raised 10 issues, including the exclusion of the Odinism evidence, the admissibility of his confessions, suppression of evidence related to his home search, alleged judicial bias, and the denial of a change of venue for the trial itself. The debate is far from settled. And the voice on that recording, down the hill, will haunt this case for years to come. Case 5. January 29, 2022. Canton, Massachusetts. A quiet suburb about 15 miles south of Boston. Early morning, just after 6 a.m. A homeowner named John McCabe steps outside his house at 34 Fairview Road and finds a man lying in the snow on his front lawn, unresponsive. The man is John O'Keefe, a 16-year veteran of the Boston Police Department. He's 46 years old. A father figure to his niece and nephew, whom he's been raising since his sister died. He's rushed to Good Samaritan Hospital, where he's pronounced dead. The cause: hypothermia and blunt force trauma to the head. The last person to see him alive: his girlfriend, Karen Reed. According to prosecutors, Reed and O'Keefe had been out drinking the night before at a bar in Canton. She was driving. Around 12:30 a.m., she dropped him off at 34 Fairview Road, where a house party was being hosted by Bryan Albert, a fellow Boston police officer. O'Keefe was going to stop in, say hello, have a drink. Reed, according to the prosecution, drove home to her house in nearby Mansfield. But hours later, around 5 a.m., she returned to Fairview Road, found O'Keefe lying in the snow, and called 911. She was hysterical, screaming, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." Investigators don't believe it was an accident. They say she hit him with her Lexus SUV, either intentionally, in a fit of rage after an argument, or while intoxicated, and left him to die in the freezing cold. Karen Reed is charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. Her defense: she didn't do it. She was framed. And the real killers are inside that house. The case becomes a lightning rod. Reed's defense team, led by attorney Alan Jackson, argues that O'Keefe was beaten inside the Albert home by other officers and their associates, then dumped outside to make it look like a hit and run. They point to injuries on O'Keefe's body, scratches on his arm, a black eye, a gash on the back of his head, that they say are inconsistent with being hit by a car. They argue the injuries look more like he was punched, kicked, and possibly attacked by a dog. They also point to a Google search allegedly made on Reed's phone at 2:27 a.m., "How long to die in cold?" Prosecutors say it's evidence of guilt. She Googled it before leaving him outside. The defense says it was made after she found him, in a panic, trying to understand what was happening. Then, there's the taillight. Pieces of a broken taillight were found at the scene, and investigators say they match Reed's Lexus SUV. But the defense brings in experts who testify that the fragments were planted, and that the damage to her vehicle was staged. They argue that the taillight pieces were too perfectly placed, that they appeared in photos taken hours apart, and that the damage to her car doesn't match the pattern of hitting a 200-pound man. The allegations go deeper. Reed's team accuses Canton Police, Massachusetts State Police, and specifically Trooper Michael Proctor, the lead investigator, of orchestrating a cover-up. Text messages surface showing Proctor mocking Reed in crude, unprofessional terms, calling her vulgar names and joking about her appearance. The defense argues he had a personal vendetta, that he was friends with the Alberts, and that he manipulated evidence to protect them. They also point to the fact that Bryan Albert sold his house and tore up the basement floor shortly after the investigation began. They argue he was destroying evidence. The first trial, in 2024, is a spectacle. Protesters line up outside the courthouse every day, holding signs that say, "Free Karen Reed," and "Justice for John." The case becomes a cause célèbre, with true crime bloggers, podcasters, and social media influencers dissecting every detail. The trial ends in a mistrial. Jurors are deadlocked. Some later say they believed Reed was innocent of murder but weren't sure about the lesser charges. There are reports that the jury was leaning heavily toward acquittal on the murder charge but couldn't reach unanimity on the others. This is the kind of story that doesn't get told enough. Share this video. Let people know. A retrial is scheduled for April 1, 2025. This time, the jury reaches a split verdict. Karen Reed is acquitted of second-degree murder and manslaughter, but convicted of operating a vehicle under the influence, a misdemeanor. She's sentenced to 1 year of probation. For Reed, it's a partial victory. She avoids prison. She's cleared of killing John O'Keefe. But the conviction means she's not fully exonerated. It means the jury believed she was drunk that night, even if they didn't believe she hit him. And she's not done fighting. In November 2025, Karen Reed files a federal lawsuit against multiple investigators, witnesses, and officials involved in the case. She alleges a coordinated conspiracy to frame her for O'Keefe's death, civil rights violations, malicious prosecution, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit names names: Trooper Michael Proctor, Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, another officer who was at the party, Jennifer McCabe, the homeowner's sister-in-law, who the defense claims deleted and manipulated phone records. The lawsuit lays out a timeline, alleges that evidence was planted and destroyed, and demands accountability. Meanwhile, a federal investigation into the Canton Police Department and the handling of the case concludes without charges. But the cloud of suspicion remains. Public trust in the investigation is shattered. Polls show a significant portion of Massachusetts residents believe Reed was framed. So what really happened that night? Did Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with her car and leave him to die in the snow? Or was he killed by people he trusted, fellow officers, friends, with the crime scene manipulated to point the finger at her? The jury said she was guilty of drunk driving. But they also said she didn't kill him. And in the court of public opinion, the verdict is still out. The bigger picture, what these 5 cases tell us. 5 cases. 5 different stories. 5 different communities. But when you step back and look at them together, patterns emerge. Themes. Questions. That go beyond guilt or innocence. DNA evidence caught Rex Heuermann. Genetic genealogy led to Bryan Kohberger. Ballistics linked Richard Allen to the Delphi crime scene. These are incredible tools. They've solved cases that would have been impossible to crack a generation ago. They've brought justice to families who thought they'd never get answers. But they're not infallible. Defense attorneys are challenging touch DNA, questioning chain of custody, and arguing that forensic science is only as good as the humans interpreting it. And they have a point. Touch DNA can be transferred innocently. A handshake. A shared surface. It doesn't prove you committed a crime, it proves you touched something. Genetic genealogy raises privacy concerns. Should your distant cousin's DNA upload to a public database be used to track you down? Ballistics matching on unfired bullets is controversial. Some experts say it's reliable, others call it junk science. Science can be misused, misunderstood, or manipulated. And in a courtroom, where the stakes are someone's life or freedom, that matters. Every one of these cases has been dissected online. Reddit threads with thousands of comments. YouTube channels dedicated to analyzing every piece of evidence. TikTok sleuths breaking down timelines. Podcasts interviewing witnesses, experts, and armchair detectives. Documentaries that frame the narrative before the trial even begins. The public doesn't just consume these stories, they investigate them. They crowdsource theories. They find inconsistencies. They demand answers. Sometimes that helps. Tips from the public have cracked cases. Pressure from online communities has kept cold cases alive. Crowdfunding has paid for independent experts and legal fees. But sometimes it hurts. Innocent people get accused. Conspiracy theories spread faster than facts. And the line between justice and entertainment gets blurry. Are we seeking truth, or are we just watching a show? The Karen Reed case is the clearest example. A significant portion of the public believes the police framed her. Whether that's true or not, the fact that it's believable says something profound about where we are as a society. People don't automatically trust the badge anymore. They don't assume prosecutors are acting in good faith. They don't believe the system is designed to find the truth. They believe it's designed to close cases, to protect its own, to maintain the illusion of control. And when trust erodes, everything gets harder. Witnesses don't come forward because they don't trust they'll be protected. Juries second-guess evidence because they don't trust it wasn't planted. And even when justice is served, it doesn't feel like enough, because people suspect there's more to the story. This isn't just about one case. It's about decades of misconduct, cover-ups, wrongful convictions, and systemic failures. It's about Rodney King and the LA riots. It's about the Central Park Five. It's about every time someone in power abused that power and got away with it. And now, in 2025, we're living with the consequences. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. Families are still waiting. Behind every headline, there's a mother who lost a daughter. A father who lost a son. A sibling, a friend, a partner, someone whose life was shattered. The Gilgo Beach families waited over a decade for an arrest. Some waited over 30 years. Tupac's family waited 27 years. Abby and Libby's families waited nearly 8. And even when there's a conviction, even when there's a sentence, the pain doesn't go away. Justice isn't a moment. It's a process. And for the people left behind, it's never fast enough. It's never complete enough. Because no verdict, no sentence, no amount of time can bring back the person they lost. Melissa Barthelomy's mother will never see her daughter again. Kaylee Goncalves' family will never watch her graduate, get married, have kids. John O'Keefe's niece and nephew lost the man who raised them. These aren't just cases. They're tragedies. And the people living with those tragedies deserve more than headlines and hot takes. They deserve answers. They deserve accountability. They deserve to be seen as more than characters in a true crime story. So here's the question we have to ask ourselves. Are we getting better at solving these cases, or just better at watching them unfold? Are we more informed, or just more entertained? And when the cameras turn off, when the podcasts move on to the next case, who's left to care? Because here's the truth, these cases matter. Not because they're sensational, not because they're shocking, but because they're human. They're about real people, real lives, real consequences. And if we're going to consume these stories, if we're going to watch, listen, comment, theorize, then we owe it to the victims, to the families, to ourselves, to do it with intention. With empathy. With a commitment to truth, not just entertainment. 5 Shadows. 5 American Stories. 5 Unfinished Chapters. Rex Heuermann awaits trial, his planning document a window into a mind we're still trying to understand. The families of the Gilgo Beach victims wait for their day in court, hoping for answers that have been decades in the making. Bryan Kohberger sits in a cell, his guilty plea leaving more questions than answers. 4 families in Idaho are left to grieve, to rebuild, to find meaning in a tragedy that will never make sense. Keffe D's trial looms, a 27-year-old case built on words instead of evidence. Tupac's legacy endures, but the question of justice remains unresolved. Richard Allen's appeal moves forward, his confession still debated, his guilt still questioned by some. Abby and Libby's families hold on to the verdict, even as the legal battle continues. And Karen Reed's lawsuit demands accountability from the very system that prosecuted her. John O'Keefe's family is caught in the middle, mourning a man they loved while the world argues over how he died. These cases aren't just about guilt or innocence. They're about how we define justice in an age of science, social media, and skepticism. They're about the fragility of truth and the weight of doubt. They're about who we trust, what we believe, and how we make sense of the senseless. Justice isn't a moment, it's a process. Messy, human, imperfect. And these 5 cases, they're still being written. If you made it this far, thank you. Seriously, this is the kind of deep dive storytelling we do here at Crime Cortex. No fluff, no filler, just the facts, the context, and the questions that matter. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, turn on notifications. We're covering more cases like this every week, cases that challenge what you think you know about justice, truth, and the system. You don't want to miss it. Stay curious, stay critical, stay human, and I'll see you in the next one.